With colleagues' permission, we'll extend the meeting by 10 further minutes. First of all, I want to question as to whether the minister can stay for a full hour, or are you obligated to leave by 4:30?
Hi, John. Mr. Chair, I will stay until 4:41.
4:41, excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And as you can see, we have the Minister Anand with us. We welcome her to her first, which I anticipate will not be the last, meetings with the committee. I hope that we have a constructive relationship and provide a useful challenge function to your very important role. Before I ask you for your presentation, I take note that we are in a hybrid format due to the ongoing pandemic situation. The directive from the Board of Internal Economy has limited the size of the room, a number of people that can be in it, and that there are physical distancing guidelines, and that we must wear a mask at all times. So with that, I'd ask the minister to make her initial presentation, and then we'll go to our questioning rounds. Welcome, Minister.
Point of clarification?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, my understanding, so I just want to make sure, is that we're to wear our masks when we're up and about in the room, but not when we're sitting. Are you saying the masks are to be
It's strongly
worn at all
recommended
times?
that members wear a mask even when seated at their place during committee proceedings.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's new.
I don't know if it's new or not. January 28th, 22.
Didn't have to wear one, but now that we're triple vaccinated, we have to wear one. Like, wow.
Well, you can take that up with the Board of Internal Economy.
All right. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Okay. With that, Minister Anand.
Mr. Chair, members of the Standing Committee on National Defense, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today. Difficult times often foster the greatest change, and I am honored to have been entrusted with this role during a pivotal moment in our institution's history. Today, I will provide you an overview of our top priorities as outlined in my mandate letter and the work our organization is doing to set us up for success. First and foremost, our success at home and abroad comes down to having an engaged and resilient armed forces with the numbers to sustain our regular operations and to step up enduring times of crisis. Les deux dernières années.
The past 2 years have demonstrated the importance of this, as our personnel continues to do incredible work in the face of a global pandemic.
Chief of Defense Staff General Wayne Eyre announced a substantive forces-wide reconstitution program. A key part of reconstitution is ensuring the defense team is a place where everyone feels safe, respected, and protected. Cet objectif est une priorité.
This goal is a top priority for me and for the entire leadership of national defense. It is truly heartbreaking to know that our members have been injured in the line of duty. Our members and all Canadians deserve to work in an environment where dignity and respect prevail. The creation of the Chief Professional Conduct and Culture Organization last year supports these efforts.
Our much-needed conduct and culture change reforms across the organization. Its work is in parallel and complementary to Madame Arbour's independent review into defense team policies and culture. We look forward to receiving her final report later this year and implementing her recommendations. There is no doubt, Mr. Chair, we are facing significant challenges right now from both domestic and global threats. However, we are also facing a fundamental challenge to the institution charged with defending our country against these threats. For too long, far too many members of the defense team have suffered sexual harassment, sexual assault, or discrimination based on sex, gender, gender identity, and sexual orientation. I will say it again. Things can change, they must change, and they will change. Turning now to international missions. Dans l'environnement opérationnel,
In today's highly complex operational environment, the skills and dedication of our people are more important than ever. Many of our international allies and partners face very real threats from state actors seeking to undermine the rules-based international order.
to Ukraine's security and sovereignty due to Russia's military buildup in and around their borders. During my recent trip to the country, I saw the toll this threat has had on our Ukrainian friends. We remain steadfast in our support. Since 2015, we have trained roughly 33,000 members of Ukraine's security forces through Operation Unifier. We just extended and expanded this mission for another 3 years. Je suis heureuse d'avoir pu rencontrer.
I am pleased to have had the opportunity to meet with Defense Minister Reznikov, and we will work closely together to identify other areas where Canada can provide support. Our work in Ukraine demonstrates that Canada is always ready to help in times of crisis.
World. We are reaffirming our commitment to peace and stability in an uncertain time. Moving now to domestic missions. Chez nous, au Canada, nous faisons.
Here at home in Canada, we are also facing an unprecedented demand for military assistance. From the beginning of the pandemic, our armed forces have been helping out in hard-hit communities and supporting vaccination efforts across the country. Thousands of personnel from the regular force, reservists, and Canadian Rangers were mobilized.
Called on to deploy personnel in response to climate-related disasters, which have increased in scope and severity over the previous decade. Moreover, Canada and North America are increasingly vulnerable to external threats that know no borders. Against a backdrop of rapid technological change and vastly increased adoption and reliance on digital technology in Canada, the government's cybersecurity expertise is essential. Le Centre de la Sécurité des Télé.
The communication security establishment's reputation in the defense of Canada is well established. Together with our armed forces, the CSC plays a vital role in strengthening our defenses here at home.
States to bolster our continental defenses. This works and includes modernizing NORAD. As part of these efforts, we are improving how we monitor, how we defend, how we operate in the Arctic region. In fact, just last week, we announced a new 7-year contract with the majority Inuit-owned Nestukuk Corporation to maintain the 50 North Warning System radar sites as we explore options for modernizing Arctic surveillance. Mr. Chair, our fighting force must be ready to respond to a variety of different threats from all directions at all times and in very close cooperation with our closest allies. And that means having the right number of people in our ranks. It means making sure that they are included, they are respected, and they are engaged. And it means giving them the right equipment and training to manage these threats. To conclude, Mr. Chair, our military is indeed at an inflection point. We are facing significant demand for Canadian Armed Forces support, both here at home and across the globe. We are also facing rapidly evolving threats that risk outpacing our ability to defend against them. Our solutions must be built around people. Nous avons besoin.
We need the right people with the right training and the right equipment. And we need to create a culture that supports the health and well-being of those individuals who perform the critical functions we entrust to them.
But I am confident by working together, we will realize our objectives. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for that timely speech. With that, we'll turn to our 6-minute round, starting off with Ms. Findlay, then Mr. Fisher, Madame Normandine, and Ms. Matheson. In that order, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. And I note that you said that it's very important that we have an engaged and resilient CAF that's able to step up during times of crisis. The U.S. and United Kingdom are sending reinforcements to NATO states, Poland and Romania, to bolster their defense. Are there any plans to send military reinforcements to join our 550-person tripwire force in Estonia or any other frontline NATO state?
Thank you for the question. Under Operation Reassurance, we are able to commit up to 900 Canadian Armed Forces members. We currently have about 500 on the ground operating in land, air, and sea. We are currently examining, from an operations standpoint, whether a further commitment would be possible, and I can ask my Chief of Defense Staff, Wayne Eyre, who's here, to comment further if you would like.
I think we'll have a chance to ask him questions later, so I will do that. Thank you. Minister, the United States is dispatching troops to Poland to help Americans escape Ukraine in the event of invasion and to not repeat any blunders of the Afghanistan evacuation. Do we have similar plans in place and people ready to go? Or are we just asking people to leave?
I can say that we are preparing for all eventualities. We are cognizant, of course, of the Russian escalation at the Ukrainian border, including in Belarus. And the Canadian Armed Forces, for example, recently moved west of the Dnipro to indeed take account of the rising threat. We are preparing for various contingencies. At this time, I think it would be prudent if I kept those contingencies close to the chest, given that we are not planning for hypotheticals, at least at the current time.
Thank you. Minister, in all of your predecessor, Minister Sajan's mandate letters, it tasked him with future fighter replacement, It's not in your mandate letter. Does that mean it's no longer a government priority and the file is either dropped or sidelined?
Thank you for the question. Not at all. Our government has been clear. A modern fighter jet fleet is essential to defending Canada. That is why we are acquiring 88 fighter jets to replace our CF-18 fleet through an open, transparent competition. We have reached a key milestone in the process, and we will be moving forward with 2 suppliers. And this competition essentially will ensure that we get the right aircraft at the right price while creating job opportunities.
Minister, certainly as long ago as I was Associate Minister of Defense, and before that, we've been talking about replacing fighter jets. There's been a lot of studies, a lot of proposals. It would seem that it's time to make that decision. Do you have a timeline for making that decision?
Thank you for the question. As you may be aware, we did reach a key milestone prior to the holidays at the end of 2021 in terms of the procurement process and narrowing the field down to 2 suppliers. That process is being run by the Department of Public Services and Procurement Canada, and I believe that the timeline is intact, but the questions relating to that timeline would be best directed there. Thank you.
How am I doing for time, Mr. Chair?
You got a couple of minutes.
There's also no mention in your mandate letter, Minister, about threats to national security, such as Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. How do you give direction to the Canadian Armed Forces about the forces needed and their connection to foreign policy when your government does not seem to see a threat to Canadian national security?
I will say in response, Mr. Chair, as outlined in the speech from the throne, peace, stability, and international security is of critical importance to Canada's strategic interests. That is why we will be moving forward as a government with establishing an Indo-Pacific strategy. That is why, Mr. Chair, we have in my mandate letter the importance of cyber surveillance and cyber security. That is why we are working on reconstituting and rebuilding the Canadian Armed Forces. All of these pieces are integral to ensuring that the Canadian Armed Forces and our broader government can act in the best interests of national security.
Minister, last question. There is also no mention in your mandate letter of the Five Eyes Alliance, the Quad, or AUKUS. Does this mean that Canada has given up on bilateral defense diplomacy and that your government is taking a pass on both the Atlantic, NATO, and the Pacific where it comes to those alliances?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, both bilateral and multilateral partnerships are fundamental to my portfolio in defense as well as to Minister Jolie's portfolio in foreign affairs. In fact, with regards to the current crisis in Ukraine, I have been engaged with our partners both bilaterally and multilaterally. For example, I have been meeting with our partners in NATO on a bilateral basis. I spoke with the Defense Minister of France, for example, this week. By the same token, we cannot underestimate the importance of the defensive relationship that we have as a member of NATO. And I was at NATO last week meeting with Secretary General Stoltenberg to reiterate Canada's commitment to the international rules-based order and to the deterrence underpinnings of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
We're going to have to leave it there, Minister, Madame Finlay. Mr. Fisher, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. It's so great to see you here. And I don't have to tell you, as a fellow Nova Scotian, that my riding of Dartmouth Cole Harbour includes CFB Shearwater, and of course has CFB Halifax right across the harbor. We have a large CAF and DND population, and of course on both sides of Halifax Harbor, we're building the Royal Canadian Navy's modern fleet. And I also don't have to tell you that there's a lot of pride at home in Nova Scotia over these incredible shipbuilders. The investments through Canada's defense policy, strong, secure, and engaged, are tangible, and they are easily felt in the riding of Dartmouth Cole Harbour and also in the riding of Halifax, and they deeply matter to our community. Now, I look forward to working with you to keep moving that forward, to keep enhancing and keep making those very important defense investments. I was pleased to see that your mandate letter includes a commitment to expanding operational reassurance in Eastern Europe. HMCS, as you know, HMCS Montreal recently deployed out of Halifax to join on this important NATO mission. And your recent announcement to extend and expand Operation Unifier was also very good to see. Minister, I'd like to talk about our commitments to NATO, especially in the context, and you spoke of this a bit in your opening remarks, and in the context of Russia, Ukraine, and the conflict there. Are members like Canada increasing cooperation to support stability in the area? And how is Canada stepping up to provide more support as a NATO member and as a very important friend to Ukraine?
Thank you for the question. Before I address the question itself, I will just say that as a daughter of Nova Scotia, I can agree that we can all be very proud of the work being done in Nova Scotia as well as in Quebec, BC, and around the country to advance our national shipbuilding strategy. Not only is this work important to ensure that the Navy has the equipment it needs to serve Canadians, it is creating high quality jobs and economic benefits to communities across our country. Now, with respect to our NATO commitments, I can say unequivocally that we have been and will continue to deepen cooperation with our friends, our allies, and our partners to support stability in the region. The recent deeply concerning buildup of Russian forces at the Ukrainian border underscores the importance of Canada's activities in the region. The fact that we have extended and expanded Operation Unifier, that we have committed $340 million over 3 years to ensure that we continue training Ukrainian soldiers, the fact that we have put forward a $120 million loan, $50 million in humanitarian aid, those are representations of our commitment not only to Ukraine, but to democracy, peace, stability, and security in the Western world. This is what we have approved additional measures that we will continue to support Ukrainian sovereignty. Now, you mentioned the broader NATO alliance, and I want to reiterate our commitment to Operation Reassurance as well. In the region of the NATO's eastern flank, Canada leads a high readiness multinational battle group in Latvia comprised of approximately 1,500 soldiers representing 10 allied nations. Canadian soldiers are serving alongside soldiers from 10 of our NATO allies. Operation Reassurance is Canada's largest military commitment, involving the deployment of land, air, and sea elements. And as you mentioned, we also contribute to frigates, a Halifax-class frigate, which set sail on January 19th to a standing NATO maritime group in European waters. And in addition, Mr. Chair, 6 CF-18 Hornets are also periodically deployed in support of NATO's enhanced air policing activities in Romania, with the next scheduled deployment set for fall 2022. I do have my Chief of Defense Staff, Wayne Eyre, with me, and he will add anything if he likes, if that's permitted by the questioner at the current time.
General Eyre? For some reason, we're not hearing you. I think you may be on mute.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me now?
Oh, we can now. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, well, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to add to my minister's comments. We remain very closely engaged with NATO as we take a look at what is happening on the eastern flank. In fact, just 8 hours ago, I was talking with NATO counterparts about the possibilities of, as we develop options for reinforcing those options, those military options. I'll be discussing in much more detail with Minister Anand in the coming days. But we remain very, very concerned but engaged with NATO.
Mr. Fisher, left.
How much time left?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, Minister, really, really quickly, I've been traveled with the NATO PA and I've traveled with this Defense Committee, and the feeling that I got when I spoke to NATO countries and parliamentarians like around the world that are in the NATO PA is that Canada unequivocally punches above its weight class. Is that something that you heard very clearly when you were there at your visit there last week?
Actually, I'm really glad that you asked that question, because what the Prime Minister of Latvia said to me, and this was reiterated by the Secretary General of NATO, is that Canada's contribution is incredibly important to the mission in terms of supporting Ukraine. In fact, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said that Canada is one of the top 3 countries, along with the UK and the US, in terms of the support that we are providing across the NATO alliance for Ukraine.
And
so your question
unfortunately,
is
we're
timely.
going to have to leave it there, or we're never going to get through our rounds of questions.
Thank you.
As I said,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Madame Normandine, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre, pour votre
Thank you, Madam Minister, for your presence today. It's always a pleasure. I'll start with a question that indirectly touches recruitment, but more specifically French in the armed forces. We know that several trainings are offered specifically or only in English, and it will be difficult for somebody who is French-speaking to move ahead. And there are also many units which are described as bilingual, but there's not a lot of French that is spoken in those units. In some cases, we've heard stories where somebody goes through the entire training in the special forces, and at the end, they are told that their English is not enough and they cannot complete their training. Given the shortage in labor shortage, we don't have the luxury to be able to afford such things. So I'd like to find out what the minister would like to do to improve the use of French in the armed forces.
Merci beaucoup pour.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, let me say that recruitment and retention are based on dedication and competence. And the 2 official languages are very important. For me, as minister, it's a very important issue. It is a priority for me to have those 2 languages and also to have diversity. Therefore, if I may ask the Defense Chief of Staff, he may add something else on the topic that has to do with official languages.
To the Defense CDS, I see Mr. May. I'm assuming you have a point of order of some kind?
Just a technical thing. We were able to get translation, but the volume of the translation and the speaker were the same, so it was hard to hear.
Okay, it's being checked into, and let me go back, Madame Normandine. We were just transferring the question, if you will, to the Chief of Defense Staff, and I'll add on a little time at the end. If that's all right. General Eyre.
No, merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. I would like to add a few points. For us, the official languages policy is primordial. It's very important. It's also important to provide training in the 2 languages. It is important to find trainers who are able to speak the 2 languages for each course. Sometimes it's a challenge. Thank you. Follow-up question with you on the opening of official programs in the 2 languages. Let me take the minister to the question of the fighters. We know that the choice of the next jet fighters will have an impact on the staff required to run the fighters. So I would like to know if an impact study has been carried out to help you make the choices when it comes to the fighter.
Understanding that the issues raised by Mr. May are actually a result of your selection of French, English, or floor. So the preference is to select floor, from what I understand. No, I'm talking about the
Okay,
minister.
je comprends.
Okay.
Oui.
I understand. I understand very well. That process is with Procurement Canada. There's always an independent fairness monitor who is there to make sure that to make sure that there's a process that is marked by integrity. May I ask if the assistant could answer? To add to what the minister has said, she's right. When it comes to using the fairness monitor process to make sure we use that to make sure that it's fair for all suppliers, it's the minister in charge of SPACs that is responsible. Well, I've not had an answer to the question about the fairness. There's also the issue of the resources. Do we have the resources to run the next fighters? I'm talking about the staff that will be available. If I may add, Mr. Chair, the issue really is, do we have the process to make sure that there'll be pilots to use those fighters, those fighter jets? I think that's a question for Mr. Ayer.
Again, General Ayer, you're on mute. A little worrisome when the Chief of Defense Staff has to deal with mute all the time.
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. We are making sure that we have enough pilots, enough technicians, enough staff who will be able to use those new capacities. It's a matter of recruitment and retention, and the Air Forces are very involved in this process. Mr. Chair, may I? Go ahead. Coming back to the choice of the F-18 replacement, there are some disadvantages choosing the F-35 when you look at the economic impact for Quebec and Canada as a whole. There's a loss of jobs, loss of expertise, loss of the possibility of having the intellectual property on the different technological components of these new fighters. I would like to know what the Minister or General Ayer have to say about the advantages of choosing this.
30 seconds or less.
Peut-être je vais commencer.
Maybe I should start. It is important to remember that we will have a transparent and open competition. The goal here is to have a process where we will have the best planes at the best price for Canadians. That's a process involving a fairness monitor, but it is important for the process to be open and transparent as well for Canadians and for the Canadian Armed Forces. Maybe General Ayer has something to add.
He's not going to get a chance to weigh in on that question, but I'm sure he will over the course of the next hour. Thank you, Madam Normandine. Madam Lindsay, Madam Matheson, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and General Ayer, for joining us today. The Deschamps report on sexual misconduct in the military was released April 30th, 2015, and yet the government has not fully implemented or partially implemented those recommendations in the Deschamps report. It's been 7 years almost. We, in the former parliamentary session under the status of women, we studied this. We looked at the Deschamps report. Numerous other justices and entities have looked and said, implement the Deschamps report. So why have you not yet implemented the reforms of the Deschamps report?
Actually, I would beg to differ that we have not implemented reforms suggested by the report, we have been making very meaningful reforms relating to culture. And in particular, you recall that the main contribution of the Deschamps report was to highlight the fact that there is a crisis of culture in the Canadian Armed Forces. And so what we have been doing is to ensure that we are building an armed forces where everyone can be safe, respected, and supported. DND has allocated $236 million over 5 years to address sexual misconduct, gender-based violence, and to support survivors. These funds will enable the Sexual Misconduct Response Center to expand its capacity and services through regional offices across the country, including in building a peer support program. The center is also developing a restorative engagement program, and military police are improving staff training to include a more victim-centric and trauma-informed approach to support those who come forward. We also have implemented the Victims' Bill of Rights. So I believe that we are continuing to make progress. We have more work to do, and I am committed to taking on that task. Thank you.
Unfortunately, in the study that I was referring to in Status of Women, we heard quite the opposite, Minister. That and I know that you're new to this role, and it's a hopefully a different mandate under your leadership. However, that is not at all what we heard from a lot of the women who had served and had to abandon their entire career because they weren't seeing that turnaround that needed to happen. And I find it difficult when you continue to reference waiting for the Arbor report. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that Justice Arbor will do an incredible job, and I have all of the respect and hopes that report will be a stellar one. However, when it's the fifth review that you're waiting for, this seems like simply diversion. And so what can you say? How can you reassure especially the women, but people, the members from the armed forces, people within DND, the civilian forces as well, who have seen quite the opposite?
Actually, I take issue with the characterization that we are waiting for anything. Since I've been on the ground, since day one, I have been taking action on this file. On November 4th, just days after I was appointed, I accepted the interim recommendation of Madame Arbour and began the process of transferring cases from the military justice system to the civilian justice system. Mr. Chair, we are not waiting. In fact, we are moving ahead very expeditiously in terms of implementing reforms that will assist women, will assist minorities, will assist LGBTQ in terms of adapting and ensuring that they have a place within the Canadian Armed Forces that is safe and secure and will ensure that they are protected. That is my priority as minister. That is what I'm working on every day with the Chief of Defence Staff and my Deputy Minister, and we will not stop until we ensure that the Canadian Armed Forces is a place where all can function in a safe and respectful environment. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm certainly glad to hear the passion and the strength with which you want to move forward. I do hope that it continues and happens in that faster way, I guess. One of the things, of course, that we've also heard is how this toxic culture has led to significant retention and recruitment issues. A lot of it also centers around mental health and stability. And one thing that we have discussed between you and I before is bringing forward of my colleague Randall Garrison's bill to improve that mental health within the Canadian Armed Forces, Bill C-206. He wants to, within this bill, remove a clause that designates self-harm as a punishable offense from the military code. That condition is considered to be a barrier to a lot of armed forces members who are facing mental health struggles but don't want to come forward and potentially face that punishment. And the problem of death by suicide for Canadian Armed Forces members is not going away. We are losing more than one serving member per month to death by suicide. Can you speak to this committee about moving this piece of legislation forward? The aim hitting this archaic legislation is to prevent that avoidance of service, and taking out self-harm simply removes that perceived barrier to treatment. Wouldn't this be an incredible way for us to address some of those retention, recruitment, mental health stigmas and barriers that lie in the way of Canadian men and women who serve in the armed forces?
That is an extremely important question, but unfortunately, Ms. Nelson has left you no time to answer it. And I am under a time constraints already, so we're going to have to move on to the second round. Colleagues, we have 30 minutes of questions in the second round, and we have 20 minutes of before the minister is obliged to leave. I'm going to be arbitrary and cut each member back a minute, and hopefully with economies of questions and economies of answers, we will get through the second round. Mr. Motz, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be sharing my question with Mr. Doherty. Minister, you've written on public sector accountability, and now it's in this role you have an opportunity to translate your writings into action. So let me ask you about the Canadian Forces Ombudsman Office. My understanding is that the Ombudsman's budget is controlled by the Chief of Defense. Interestingly, in 2018, the Ombudsman went to the then Defense Minister Sajan over allegations of multiple sexual misconducts at the highest ranks of the forces. The Office of the Ombudsman was then subjected to an investigation shortly thereafter, ordered by the then Chief of Defense. So my question is very simple. When will you report back to this committee on exactly when you intend to fix this and ensure the independence, the absolute independence of the Canadian Forces Ombudsman Office?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'll begin by saying that our government is deeply committed to transparency and respects the important work that the Ombudsman does. I met with the Ombudsman late in 2021 and conveyed this point to him. In May 2015, certain financial authorities in the Ombudsman office were taken away following findings of irregularities by an Auditor General report. The Chief of Defense Staff and Deputy Minister have requested more details on these incidents to review and resolve them. But rest assured, Mr. Chair, I do believe in the full functioning of an ombudsman's office like the one we have here.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Doherty.
Minister, thanks for being here. Pardon the brevity. I don't have a lot of time. Can you tell me the national 10-digit Canada suicide prevention hotline, yes or no?
No, I cannot.
Minister, can you tell me the Halton Regional Branch in your riding of the Canadian Mental Health Association, your riding their 10-digit suicide or crisis hotline, yes or no?
Mr. Chair, I am very committed to mental health issues and issues relating to suicide, if that's where the member is going with these questions.
Minister, can you tell me the Canada Forces Member Assistance Program that has a 10-digit distress number? Can you tell me that number?
The number is easily accessible to me. I do not have it in front of me at this moment, if that's what the member is asking.
Minister, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just merely trying to point out that in a crisis when seconds count, having an easy to remember 3-digit number like 988 can be critical in saving lives. Would you agree to that?
Yes, I would.
Minister, are you familiar with my Bill C-211 that passed in 2018, an act to establish a federal framework on PTSD?
I am.
Part of that bill was a requirement for the federal government to produce a report setting out the framework 18 months after the act. Are you familiar with that report?
With respect, Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes.
No.
Go ahead.
We've been doing really well, and I want to stay on track.
This is on track. It's relevant.
Relevance. The minister's here to talk about her mandate letter, and I just wondering if the member can get back to a question about the mandate letter.
With all due respect, Mr. Chair.
Let me just cut this to an end. Mr. Chair. Let me bring this to an end. I deem the questions to be relevant. You may continue with this line of questioning, although I think it would be more fruitful if the line of questioning was not quite so adversarial.
I apologize if it seems adversarial. I'm just trying to get the questions in the 2.5 minutes I have, and I do apologize. And I take offense to the relevance question on that. part of the report talks about the Canadian Armed Forces and the mental health programs available to Canadian Armed Forces members. Are you familiar with the CAF-VAC Joint Suicide Prevention Strategy, Minister?
Of course I am. I'm the Minister of National Defense, and I take issues relating to mental health extremely seriously.
I appreciate that. Would you agree that the 988 National Suicide Prevention Hotline would be accessible to all Canadians, would be something that the Canadian Armed Forces could also employ?
The issue of mental health and the Canadian Armed Forces is one that I've discussed at length with my team and with the Chief of Defence Staff, and we will continue to adopt reforms that support the mental health of Canadian Armed Forces members.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Ms. O'Connell, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Minister, just following up on those questions, I think everyone can agree the value for a 3-digit national mental health hotline, but what is waiting for that caller on the other side is equally important. Do you feel that somebody who is trained to deal with, let's say, children who are having thoughts of suicide, or a nurse who might be having thoughts of suicide would require a different level of expertise from, say, a veteran or an active serving CAF member, so that on the other side of that hotline, that the work to ensure that the trained individuals dealing in this crisis moment actually have an understanding of what, for example, a CAF member serving might be facing, that might be different and require different training, not less, not better, just different training than another Canadian also in crisis?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that is absolutely important, and that is why the health and well-being of our members is my top priority. That is why we are investing in the mental health of our defense team, including launching a joint suicide prevention strategy along with my colleague, Minister of Veterans Affairs, Macaulay. We are also providing $17.5 million through Budget 2017 on a Center of Excellence focused on the prevention and treatment of PTSD and mental health. The bottom line is that National Defense offers a wide range of programs and services to meet the needs of our civilian and military members, including 31 in-house mental health clinics and referral options to over 4,000 mental health care providers. This includes dedicated mental health professionals at 31 of 37 Canadian Armed Forces Health Services Centres, a 24/7 phone referral service for access to counseling and peer support for those coping with operational stress. The Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain Service also provides personal support and can refer members to social workers, psychologists, and other medical services.
I don't mean to cut you off. I am just really limited in time. And one last question on that. With all of the supports that you have indicated as well, when the government is able to set up the 3-digit mental health hotline, are you and your department commenting and providing advice that would be specific to whether it is with Minister Macaulay for veterans or active members through CAF and the departments that you represent, supporting the government in the establishment for, like I said, having a 3-digit hotline is important, but only if the supports on the other end are there and ready to serve a Canadian or a CAF member in crisis. Are you providing this specific expertise in that work?
Minister, in the 30 seconds that you have left, which adds to this important question, can you just raise your microphone a bit? Apparently you're popping. I don't know whether... Okay, try that. We'll see how it goes.
We are committed to ensuring our military personnel have access to robust and high-quality mental health care and services that they need and that they deserve. We are taking a whole-of-government approach to mental health, and my Deputy Minister, Bill Matthews, may have something to add here.
Probably does, but he's not going to have that chance. With that, Ms. McConnell's time is over. Madame Normandine, a minute and a half.
Merci beaucoup. Sur les,
Thank you very much. I'm coming back to the fighters once again. To what extent has the United States had on this procurement, on this purchase?
Comme j'ai déjà dit,
As I've said already, it's a process with Procurement Canada. It's not the process where the minister is there, but I would like to ask if my deputy minister has something to add that has to do with the United States, because I do not have that information at this time. Let me rather move on to the next question. Should I understand that the process is as transparent and as independent to the extent that any pressure from the United States will have no impact whatsoever on the process?
comme j'ai déjà
As I answered already, the process is independent. And it's a process that involves public services and Procurement Canada. It's not with me. I'm not the one involved. And I know that it's an independent process and a transparent process. And without any involvement by politicians.
Ms. Masson, a minute and a half, please.
I have to practice my brevity. So I'd like to come back to the question that you weren't able to answer from the last round. Do you support the aims of Bill C-206 in eliminating self-harm as a punishable offense under the Military Code of Conduct?
I'll begin by saying that I do support mental health concerns and support and ensure, as I've just responded to a previous question. The section that you're referencing is not meant as a punitive measure against those suffering from mental health issues. It includes protections within the military justice system for persons who suffer from mental health issues. Nonetheless, in Justice Fish's report, he recommended amending the Queen's regulations and orders for the Canadian Armed Forces to clarify regarding intent. The Office of the Judge Advocate General has therefore recommended that a note be inserted to clarify that self-injurious conduct relating to mental illness is excluded from the scope and application of Section 98C. The Judge Advocate General is here with us, and if you would like to hear from him directly, I could turn the mic over to him.
I would love to, and to know exactly when that's going to happen and how quickly.
We're gonna have to leave that question out there, and you can possibly direct it to Colonel Holman in the next round of questions, because we're just running the clock. I'm sorry. Madame Gallant, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morale is at an all-time low with Canadian forces, short thousands of members. Yet, even those who've had the first COVID inoculation suffered serious adverse reactions and had cardiologists recommend foregoing subsequent COVID injections are sent packing without earned pensions and benefits. Minister, even Russell Williams was afforded his pension. So why are soldiers who've served honorably for decades being treated worse than a convicted serial rapist and murderer when it comes to refusing a new vaccine?
Mr. Chair, the Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadian government, in fact, believe in the importance of vaccines as they are recommended by our public health experts. To date, 98% of the Canadian Armed Forces have been vaccinated. In reference to the specific question, I will turn the mic over to Chief of Defence Staff Wayne Eyre.
Well, Wayne can answer later on something. In a May 2000 ruling described as enlightened and precedent-setting, a military judge stayed a charge of disobeying a direct order for declining the injection of a mandated new anthrax vaccine. It was wrong to force military personnel with the injections of new drugs on soldiers back then, according to the ruling. So what has changed since then?
Mr. Chair, I will reiterate that as regards to the current pandemic, our government and the Canadian Armed Forces are committed to vaccines against COVID-19, which have been proven to reduce the severity of the virus. Thank you.
What advice was sought from the Justice Department before the mandate on the military was decreed?
Mr. Chair, the mandates put in place in the Canadian Armed Forces and in federal workspaces are based on public health guidance relating to the efficacy of vaccines. In this party, we follow the science, and that's exactly why these mandates are in place.
I just point out to colleagues that we are here to ask the minister questions about her mandate letter, not mandates generally.
Oh, public servants are on administrative leave. Why are soldiers being treated differently from public servants? They're being booted right out. No benefits, no pension.
Again, that is a question that I would direct to my Chief of Defence Staff, Wayne Eyre, and he would be able to best respond to issues relating to vaccines within the Canadian Armed Forces.
Thank you, Minister. And when you were first put into that position, I invited you to base Petawawa to visit the troops there and accompany you there. That invitation is still open, and I hope we're able to see you there.
Thank you so much. I have been visiting bases across the country. I believe it is extremely important to speak directly with members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I do hope to visit Petawawa sometime very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Gallant. Madame Lambropoulos, final 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister Anand, for being here with us today to answer our questions. I was hoping, I know that you mentioned earlier the $236 million over 5 years in order to combat gender-based violence and sexual misconduct and any discrimination based on gender. And I was hoping you can elaborate a little bit more on what programs you plan on putting into place. And also, this has been a problem for a very long time. I know that this has been perhaps money that's been allocated in previous budgets. And so I'm wondering what the difference is now and why we should be able to recognize a change in the coming mandate.
Thank you so much for the question. I would like to zone in on one of the major reforms that we've put in place, and that's the Sexual Misconduct Response Center, which provides 24/7 confidential counseling, assistance, advocacy, and accompaniment to victims of sexual misconduct. Since it's been put in place, we have received over 1,100 contacts, which suggests to us that there is a need for this type of response center. Furthermore, what's so important is that it operates independently from the Canadian Armed Forces chain of command and reports directly to the Deputy Minister, who is here with me today in case you have further questions. This SMRC has agreements with 9 community-based sexual assault centers in communities that have a large Canadian Armed Forces presence. For example, in fiscal year 2021-2022, 1,100 total contacts were made to the center. The Arbor report that we are going to be receiving this year will include an examination of the Sexual Misconduct Response Center's mandate, activities, independence, and reporting structure, but we didn't wait. We didn't wait for this report. We put this reform into place because we realized that peer-to-peer support and support for those suffering from sexual harassment and sexual violence is necessary now. It is a very important project and approach, and we will continue to support it and build on it in the Canadian Armed Forces and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And obviously recruitment is an issue. And if more women were recruited and if more people who were a little bit more open-minded and who had a better idea of what the culture of the military should look like, things would change, obviously. Any plans on change in structure in that sense in order to change the culture from the top down?
With regards to recruitment and retention, or?
How can new recruits and getting a new blood in the system change the way that things are run currently?
Okay, fantastic question, because what my mandate letter actually asked me to do is to ensure that we have diversity and openness to all people in the Canadian Armed Forces. And I believe that our recruitment efforts and our retention efforts have to ensure that we are keeping diversity and inclusion at the top of mind at all times. We need in any year about 7,000 regular force members to meet our operational readiness target in the Canadian Armed Forces. And what we are doing to meet that is focusing engagement activities across Canada to increase women enrollment, prioritizing women applicants at military colleges, and prioritizing mentoring cadets, and enhancing women care and family leaves. What is this going to do? What are these efforts going to do? They're going to hopefully attract a more diverse pool of applicants to the Canadian Armed Forces. And so we will have more and more women and diverse individuals moving up the ranks so they are qualified to fulfill leadership positions within the Canadian Armed Forces. That is a priority to me. Whenever I speak with the Chief of Defence Staff, Wayne Eyre, I mention this because of the importance not only to the Canadian Armed Forces, but to the Canadian population at large. Our forces should reflect the diversity in the broader Canadian public that we see.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Madame Lambropoulos. That brings us to the end of our first hour with the Minister. We went 2 minutes over time, Minister. I appreciate your indulgence, and thank you for your appearance here. We can suspend for a moment while the Minister leaves the meeting, but again, on behalf of the committee, thank you for your appearance here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee members. Take good care.
We do the gavel thing, okay? Then we gavel it back in. Welcome to your first appearance before this committee, and I'm pretty sure you've been before this committee a few times before. Mr. Matthews, welcome. I see Colonel Holman, welcome, Colonel Holman, and I see Ms. Bruce, welcome. General Eyre, I'll turn to you. I don't know whether you do or don't have any opening statement. If you do have an opening statement, you're welcome to do it now.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have a prepared opening statement, but I will say a few words. So Minister Anand talked about an inflection point, and I see the Canadian Armed Forces on the cusp of so much change right now. We are seeing so much change in the international security environment as geopolitics takes a turn for the worse. We're seeing so much change in terms of the climate and what that means for not just our ability to respond to domestic emergencies, but how that's causing conflict around the world. We see so much change in technology. an acceleration in the pace of technological change and what that is doing to the way that we need to operate to defend Canada and Canadian interests. And we're seeing so much change within our societies. That means that we have to change to reflect better reflect our societies. And so I'll be able to unpack any of that in more detail, Mr. Chair, depending where the questions go.
Thank you, General Eyre. Apparently there is a theme for the day. And with our theme for the day, Mr. Motz and Mr. Doherty, 6 minutes between you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, I will be sharing my time with Mr. Doherty. General Eyre, welcome. Greetings from Medicine Hat. I know you spent some time there. I have just 2 questions for you, sir. I recently received an email from a retired member of the Armed Forces to note that he and 300 other crew members had been deployed and didn't receive their at-risk pay because the paperwork wasn't done on time. And after returning, they were told their back pay was tied up with other pay adjustments. It would be between 3 and 10 years. 3 and 10 years before it was resolved. Now, many of these people, this individual has left already. Many will be leaving, and no doubt they'll be leaving in part because of these issues. Who's going to check that everyone gets paid the right amount in this debacle? And I know all I'm asking you, sir, is will you commit to resolving the at-risk pay and back pay issues within the next 6 months?
Hey, Mr. Chair, thanks for that question. I get irked when I hear stories like that, so I have to get the details and look into it more. But from the sounds of it, it's something that needs to get sorted out.
Thank you, sir. If you get a hold of my office, we'd be happy to give you the details of this gentleman and the ship that it was referring to. My second question, General, our committee is undertaking a study on the threats and force readiness, as you are aware. There are serious concerns given the increased global tensions, a shift in warfare to cyber, a lack of personnel, as had been mentioned already today by the minister, training and equipment issues, that Canada is not really a trusted ally any longer, and it's concerning some of our allies, and that we can't deal with the coming challenges. Can you outline your mid to long-term concerns about the future of the forces, and what is your plan to address those?
So, Mr. Chair, understand we don't have a heck of a lot of time here. I will try to make this concise. I'm very concerned about what the future security environment entails, because Canada is no longer as safe as it once was, or it once thought itself to be. So I believe that the Canadian Armed Forces is going to be increasingly called upon to address security threats around the world and to protect Canada and Canadians here at home. So what is the plan to do that? Well, over the course of the pandemic, we have shrunk. We have our readiness has reduced. Last summer, I issued a Canadian Armed Forces reconstitution plan, and that plan focuses on rebuilding our strength, not the same, but to be focused, to be oriented on those threats that we're going to face in the future. 3 priorities. Number 1, people. Right at the top of that list is changing those harmful, exclusionary aspects of our culture, addressing some of the real challenges in our society right now, the cost of housing, the cost of living. One of the major dissatisfiers that I see as I travel around the country. And thirdly, rebuilding our strength, getting our numbers back up there. Second priority, operations. Being ready to respond to the plethora of hotspots we see around the world, the constant demand for Canadian Armed Forces intervention. And then finally, modernization. And we cannot take our eye off the future. We can't mortgage the future to pay for the present. So continuing to get those projects that are in our defense policy, continuing to focus on continental defense and what we need to do, looking at our force structure, and perhaps changing some of the structure that's been in place for 70 years since the industrial age, and get it better ready for the information age. What this means, though, is we have to put the concepts in place as well. You talked about cyber. That's one of the new domains I'm quite worried about. Space is the other. We have to better integrate those domains: land, air, sea, cyber, space, information, to have really a pan-domain approach, integrated approach, as as we approach the challenges of our future, because our adversaries are doing just that.
Doherty has about a minute and a half.
Oh, great. Ms. Bruce, do you think Canada approving Huawei for 5G presents significant national security concerns for our country?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. As you know, the CSE has a very significant mandate when it comes to cybersecurity, and we are very interested in telecommunications security and have been working with the other partners in the government to work on the proposals that will inform a decision for the government.
Should Canada ban Huawei in your view, yes or no?
I have to leave the government's decision will be forthcoming.
General Eyre, same question. Should Canada ban Huawei in your view, yes or no?
So that's a government decision, and I'll leave it at that.
General, you touched on it. Morale is at an all-time low by all accounts. That is a big job to recruit and retain. The minister mentioned a couple times in her opening remarks the right people, the right equipment. Is that to say that we haven't had the right people, or is that a different focus?
So over the course of our history, morale has gone up and down, and it's not a constant. You know, we're facing a particularly challenging time right now, as are all Canadians, and we're not immune from the challenges out there in society. But we have I think it's important to realize that our troops, our people, continue to do excellent things here at home and around the world, and they are proud to serve. They serve selflessly. They leave their families behind. You know, as we speak, we've got people in harm's way in different places around the world. And as we go out and we talk to them doing their jobs, they are very, very proud of what they're doing. Could we use more equipment? Could we use more people? Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, General Eyre, Mr. Doherty's time has expired. With that, we go on to Mr. Zuberi. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, General Eyre, for being here, and Deputy Minister, and to all the witnesses. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying, by sharing that I myself did serve in uniform in our armed forces as a reservist many years ago, for about 5 years, and I appreciate you being here today. I want to ask a question that is somewhat personal, something that I've seen, witnessed in the past when I was in uniform. It relates to sensitivity training. It relates to diversity inclusion, and relates to what I've seen in the past. Not personally witnessed, but in general terms. We know that sexual misconduct, harassment, discrimination has been a large conversation as it relates to the armed forces. And the minister recently said that things can change, they must change, and they will change. I'd like to put forth to both of you, in terms of the department and CAF, Canadian Armed Forces, what are the forces doing to uphold this? General Eyre, if you'd like to comment, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I have a large list of initiatives that I could discuss of different activities that we're undertaking. There is no one single silver bullet for culture change. It's a number of initiatives, top down and also bottom up. But I will say at its root, what we need to do is address the exclusionary aspects of our culture. You know, traditionally, we've come from a homogeneous group. We've been recruited from a homogeneous group, but the face of Canada is changing, and our armed forces, if we are to be successful in the future, has to be able to attract and retain talent from whatever segment of Canadian society from which it may come. So if we have if operational effectiveness is predicated on cohesion, cohesion is predicated on teamwork, the way that we build our teams has to change. We have to have a much more inclusive approach to leadership. What I mean by that is we just can't have a cookie cutter approach to building teams. Leaders at every level have to understand the unique backgrounds, strengths, weaknesses, developmental needs of each one of their individuals, so they can weave them together to form that team. Every member of that team has to believe that they are in an organization in which they belong, that they feel psychologically safe to contribute, to share their ideas, to point something out if it doesn't look right. We've started to operationalize this. Last fall, we issued an inclusivity directive, how inclusivity is going to be operationalized and assessed down the chain. We're changing our leadership training, all levels, to have more focus on the human domain, emotional intelligence, power dynamics, inclusion. We're about to publish a revised military ethos called Trusted to Serve. Much more focus on, previously we'd focused on competence, still very important, but even more so character. Character has to lead, competence can follow. And one of the new military values we're bringing in is inclusion, because it is so important for our operational effectiveness going into the future. Not to mention, it's the right thing to do.
Certainly, and thank you for that. I'd like to open up to Deputy Minister Matthews, if you'd like to comment further.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe 3 quick points. Number one, Department of National Defense is made up of both armed force members and civilians, often working, shoulder to shoulder. So capturing both sides of the culture is important. Just 2 examples to add to what the Chief of Defense Staff said. We do have an anti-racism secretariat that's been stood up. It's now underneath the culture change group, and that's an important piece. And then just another example on inclusivity, we do have, I think, upwards of 70,000 of our defense team members have now taken the Indigenous culture course, just as one more step in broadening awareness around the importance of inclusivity as we build the forces going forward.
And just to follow up, I'd like to ask around, so we heard at a very high level how that is happening. That's great. Love hearing about the character aspect, loved hearing about the emotional intelligence aspect. How are you implementing that in the day-to-day reality of soldiers in serving uniform? In particular, I'm thinking back in the day when I was in uniform. I used to get once a year. I used to get something called sharp training, and it would be a refresher each and every year. So I'm just curious about that. Where that's at today.
Mr. Chair, I think that once a year training was one of the reasons we did not make the progress that we should have. It's kind of like going to the gym once a year and saying that you're fit. It doesn't work. So the approach that we need to take is it has to be continuous. It has to be in all of our leadership training. It has to be in our self-directed professional development, and we have to talk about it. And only through that continuous improvement are we going to be able to make that change. And so that's why I'm so excited to see the advances we're making in our professional military education and our professional development. We're not going to be able to do this overnight, but this is the intent. This is what we've started, and we're going to keep our focus on making this baked into our daily life.
Thank you, Mr. Zaveri. And you, like I, are shattered that once a year in the gym isn't going to cut it. Madame Normandine, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup. Encore une fois.
Thank you. Once again, thank you to all the witnesses for coming before us. The witnesses mentioned that when it comes to recruitment, there are many factors, misconduct, COVID, and so on. We also hear about transitioning from military life to civilian life for veterans. And this makes the forces interesting as well. Something else that we've heard, when they leave military life, the medical file is also closed, and they have to transition to a civilian doctor, and it's very difficult. So I wonder, could it be one of the things to be considered, make it possible to be covered by a military doctor at the time they leave military life? What can be done to ensure a better transition for them?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. It is a concern that we have as well, and that is one of the driving reasons that several years ago we established the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group to assist our members as they transition back to civilian life, so they reintegrate back into Canadian society. And part of that transition process is closely working with Veterans Affairs Canada to ensure that relevant medical data relevant medical information is transferred. We made some tremendous progress with this over the course of the last number of years. In fact, I was just talking to Deputy Minister of Veterans Affairs last week, 2 weeks ago, about this. The proposal of using Canadian Armed Forces Health Services personnel to continue to treat veterans, I would love to do that, but the challenge is capacity. And right now, the limiting factor that we have in so many of our activities is just the sheer number or the sheer lack of medical resources that we have. And so right now it's a question of resources and also a question of coverage. The Canadian Health Act is quite clear that the regular force members will receive medical coverage from within the Canadian Forces Health Services. And so we don't have the policy top cover for that either. I'll ask the Deputy Minister if he has more on this.
Juste un petit point à ajouter.
Something to add? I left the ministry, the department, and I came back and I've noticed that there's some improvements between the two departments because it's important to work to improve that.
In my 3-year hiatus, and I'm delighted to see that. Not to say there's not more to do, but there's noticeable improvement.
Avant ma prochaine question, juste
A comment. What we also hear is that the military doctors who've taken care of the soldiers understand their situations, and sometimes the civilian doctors do not understand their problems. So you cannot simply take up a new file, and they have to start all over when they go to a civilian doctor, and it takes a long time. Let me go on to the drone, which could go either to Bagotville or Gagetown. Could you please give us an update on that?
Donc, merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. That's a plan that is still underway. We are about to publish the call for tenders. A decision will be taken to assess all calls for tenders. Do we have an idea of how many of those drones will be involved? At this point, I cannot give you the answer. Maybe in the coming months, I could give you a more specific answer. Last question. A massive call was made during COVID asking for support for our armed forces. I would like to know whether the armed forces think that they have enough resources to respond to demands that are made by the provinces asking for their support. Or do you feel that the provinces are asking for their help a bit too much?
Oh, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I will go back to my comments on Canadian Forces Health Services and our capacity. We can almost be viewed as the 14th health jurisdiction in Canada, much like the provinces and territories. And so when we provide, when the ask comes in for medical support, we have to take it away from our own clinics, our own care, our own training. And so that has been the biggest challenge over the course of the pandemic, as that has been a shortfall across Canada. And so as we go forward, as we look at what additional capacity and capabilities we may need in the future, health services is right at the top of the list.
s'il y avait un autre commentaire.
Yeah.
Je sais qu'il me reste une 30 secondes.
You've only got 30 seconds.
J'aurai le temps de poser une question. mais
Merci,
pas avoir de
Madame
réponse.
Normandin.
Merci.
Ms. Matheson, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. I'd like to direct my question to Colonel Holman. As we were discussing with the minister, we were talking about Bill C-206 and wanting to make the amendment to delete paragraph 98C from the Defense Act. Many families, the military ombudsman, Justice Fish remarked on this as an obstacle to people getting help with mental health issues. Families have asked that this be removed because they see it as a barrier for those who are contemplating self-harm. Could you, Colonel Holman, discuss why, when the minister was talking about it, she spoke about about this note being added, and why you just actually won't remove the section altogether.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Matheson for the question. I'd start by recognizing and accepting absolutely the concern that underlies the question and the proposal in the bill. It's a valid concern and one that we have to take seriously. I think the key in giving effect to our intention to address it is finding the right balance between addressing that concern and ensuring that an important disciplinary concern continues to be addressed. So that is to say that the provision, deals with an important operational and disciplinary concern. We need to ensure that that we can count on members of the armed forces being ready to serve when called upon to do so. So it's a matter of balance. This is a provision that was used several hundred times during World War II, has been used, a handful of times in the more modern era. Our allies, all of those whose legal systems flow from the Anglo tradition, all continue to have that provision in their codes of service discipline or the equivalent. So in terms of what can we do going forward, the proposal that was submitted to Justice Fish was that we consider putting in a note to clarify the legislator's intent, to clarify Parliament's intent, that this is not a provision that is intended to capture those who, as a result of mental illness or mental disorder, seek to harm themselves. And it's our thought that that is an appropriate way to strike the balance between the concerns that you're raising, the concerns that are raised in the bill, and the operational concerns.
If this isn't something that is been used, or you said it's a handful of times since World War II, why do you so desperately? Why would the JAG? Sorry, not you directly, but why would the JAG so desperately need to hold on to it? Is it not true that so many have actually identified this specifically as a barrier in terms of receiving that mental health help?
So. Sorry, thank you. I had some trouble unmuting myself there. So I think the key point is the JAG's role here is to provide legal advice on options. The Chief of the Defense Staff, the chain of command, are the folks who actually provide instructions on these things, and we're working closely with members of the chain of command. In fact, we've been working closely with our medical professionals as well, and I understand that they've testified before this committee in the past on the committee's hearing, including Dr. Jetley, the Director of Mental Health for the Canadian Forces. So we're continuing to try and find a way to, as I said, balance those concerns, working closely with the users, the owners of the system, who are the commanders.
Okay. General Eyre, it's good to see you again. Recently, NDDN and the CAF departmental results, they were tabled, and the report found that a percentage of the air fleets that are serviceable to meet training and readiness requirements was at 55% in 2020 and 2022, which missed the target of about 85%. That's a significant decline. Now, the report didn't explain why, and I was hoping that you could shed more light on this matter. I would imagine it's a key concern that the target was missed by so much. And I would like to ask if the delay in selecting a replacement fighter jet that has occurred is potentially the reason for this decrease.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So the 85% target is just that; it's aspirational, and I'm not sure if there's any air force in the world that is able to achieve that rate of serviceability with their aircraft. But that being said, my understanding are there's multiple factors for this. This 55% rate, including the impact of COVID, the physical distancing, the restrictions that were in place. You can't get all the technicians huddled around one aircraft at the same time. Is the age of the aircraft a factor? Yeah, absolutely. But I think the important thing is we have been able to deliver on operations continually. And so we've been ready to respond, ready to deploy our aircraft as the need has been there.
Thank you, Ms. Matheson. We're now on to the next round. Ms. Gallant, 5 minutes, please.
I think I'm going to be taking this, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Well, I guess we could allow that.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, welcome to the witnesses. General Eyre, I'm paraphrasing, but I believe you testified we're making sure we have enough pilots, training, and personnel. The Canadian Forces are about 10,000 people short, the Navy 1,000 short, infantry battalions are down to 300 people. We have under 50 fighter pilots, and 50% of your occupations are severely stressed. So exactly what mitigation and recruitment initiatives have you undertaken to bring our military to full strength and operationally ready, especially given that we're on the verge of a European war?
So, Mr. Chair, this is a question that that consumes me, and very, very focused on it. I'm not going to get into the exact figures here, but what is important is we focus on both ends of this problem, so recruiting and retention. So in terms of recruiting initiatives, what we're doing for this year is we are staffing our recruiting system to 100%. We are staffing our recruit training system to 100%. We're looking at making efficiencies in our personnel production pipeline so that recruits flow through that pipeline in a more efficient manner so that they are ready to be operationally deployed much faster. At the front end, the attraction campaign is being much more focused. The upgrades to customer service aspects of our recruiting website, understanding that much of the recruiting is going online right now. We're making much more changes on the marketing content of our recruiting online presence. Talking about the contract options, talking about the 100 plus occupations that are out there. There's a big myth propagated by Hollywood that you join the military, you're going to have a big rucksack and you're going to carry a gun. Yeah, that's true for a small number of our occupations, but the vast number are very, very different. So a tremendous variety of different occupations that young or Canadians of all ages can go into.
So do you have some sense of, General, we only have a short amount of time, do you have some sense of these initiatives you're taking when we might see the CAF being at full strength and operationally ready?
So in terms of, so it's interesting. We were on a growth path immediately prior to the pandemic, and our numbers were increasing. But at the same time, our ceiling has increased as well because of the additional positions that came as part of the defense policy. So given the gap that we have right now, which is about, on the regular force side, about 6,000 people, it's going to take a number of years, and we're in the process of modeling that depending on how effective these efficiencies are that I talked about, how long that is going to take to bring us back up to that number.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand, General Eyre, that you've been Deputy UN Commander in Korea. How do you view the threats posed to international and our national security by Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea? And could you rank those threats?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. That tour in Korea gave me a front row seat to what was happening in the security environment in Asia Pacific. Invaluable experience. And what we see are countries, authoritarian states, achieving their national objectives, changing the rules-based international order to their benefit, the order that has served world security for so long, so well. And so in terms of ranking threats, well, you've named the key ones, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all have designs on changing either regional or the world order for their benefit. oftentimes achieving national objectives just below the threshold of violent conflict by having all elements of national power work together: diplomacy, economics, military, information. And so it's something that is of great concern.
Thank you, Ms. Finn. You have 4 seconds.
4 seconds.
4 seconds, I don't think so.
I will use it wisely by saying thank you very much.
Yes, excellent use of 4 seconds. Madame Labropoulos.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you, first of all, for being here to answer our questions. And I guess my first question is going to be around cyber threats. I know that Minister Anand in her mandate letter has several references to cybersecurity, and we heard from CSE and CSIS at our last meeting who said that these threats have been increasing steadily for the last while, mainly by China and Russia, along with others. What kind of plans do you have going forward in order to make sure that we accomplish this part of the mandate?
Shall I take that question?
Yes.
Thank you very much for the question. It's very front of mind. CSE's mandate is first and foremost in the cyberspace. So whether we're collecting foreign intelligence through cyberspace or we're helping to protect systems through our cybersecurity mandate, it is our raison d'etre. So this part of the minister's mandate letter is very near and dear to our hearts. As you said, they are increasing in sophistication, in number, in variety. And so we have to really look at what it's going to take for Canada to address some of these. We've decided that a whole of society approach is the most appropriate one. And in that whole of society approach, the federal government does play a specific role and has a key lead role to play. So, for example, when it comes to defending the government systems, we've also consolidated our cyber expertise at the federal level within CSC and the Cyber Center. We produce cyber threat intelligence through our FI mandate, our foreign intelligence mandate, and we have new legislation that allows us to conduct foreign cyber operations offshore to help mitigate some of the threats before they materialize in Canada. It's not just CSE, it's very much a team sport at the federal level. But one thing we're trying very much to do is to share some of the competitive advantage we have through our federal mandates back with the public. So we are doing more public threat assessments that really incorporate the insights that come from our intelligence mandate. We're providing advice and guidance and technical indicators publicly, but also through secure and special channels to critical infrastructure owners and operators and defenders so that they can have the information they need. We are providing tools that we develop in our own mandate into the public domain so that Canadians and others can use them. And we're also providing our threat feeds to other organizations like CIRA, for example, who's the Canadian DNS registry. So it allows them to take our threat feed and pass that along to Canadians through apps that they develop, apps like Canadian Shield. And we're also taking down fraudulent domains that are masquerading as the Government of Canada. So far in the last couple of years, we've taken down about 10,000 of those sites together with industry partners. So the minister's mandate letter is asking us, just as a reminder, to ensure that CSE is in a position to continue to lead Canada's response to the evolving cyber risks. They are definitely in a dynamic and fluid space right now. So we will continue to work with critical infrastructure sectors and government jurisdictions like provinces and territories and municipalities and really try to decant the knowledge that we have with them. And we'll be working with the minister and her team to address the mandate letter to look at the resourcing for CSE.
What in your opinion, what would CSE need in order to help it fulfill its mandate?
So our mandate exists across the entire country. We have a mandate for defending Canadian government systems, and I feel like there is some more work that needs to be done there. However, the defenses that we've built so far are quite dynamic and resilient. We are really working on a more national campaign to get Canadians, small and medium enterprises, critical infrastructure owners and operators to really try to raise the bar by just adopting basic cybersecurity hygiene. measures. This will go a long way to stopping many, many different kinds of threats that are out there. So there are a number of ideas we have, but we're working through those with the minister's office.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have about 24 seconds.
Okay. I was going to refer to COVID-19 and how recently we've seen, I guess, an increase in service to Canadians here at home by the armed forces. And I wanted to see if maybe if we were to focus a little bit more on that, do you believe that that would attract more people to the forces?
Well, that's, again, an important question, but there's no time for the response.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move to Madame Normandine, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Let me start by once again thanking the witnesses for showing up. I'll ask one question. Please take your time to answer that question about the changes. We've often heard that it's a problem when it comes to recruitment and retention. What is being done to reduce the number of transfers that are non-essential? And when it is necessary, what is being done to better assist families, because it's more difficult for families? So you can answer the two questions at the same time.
No, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We are working on trying to prolong the posting duration in various locations so we don't have to move as frequently. And so we're asking the hard questions. Is it absolutely necessary that this individual and their family has to move this summer? If not, let's leave them in location. But it's a complex problem because we have to realize that some locations are more preferable than others. Some of our more remote locations have to be properly staffed. And so we have to share, to be fair, the postings to those locations. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is working with the provinces to make the transition between provinces much easier. So things like healthcare, driver's license, et cetera, to ease the burden on families, certifications of spouses in their employment. And finally, I would add, we have learned over the course of the pandemic that remote working from a distance, you can actually get things done like we are here at this committee. And so leaving people in positions in one part of the country, having them work in another is something that we've started to do. Can't do it for everything. Knowledge workers, it works. Technicians, those that have to operate in the field, those that have to fly aircraft, you can't commute to work from a distance in those positions.
Thank you, Madame Normandine. With that, Madame Finlayson, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A number of investments need to be made, of course, in NORAD's modernization. We've spoken about that as well, and I'm not sure if this is directed towards General Eyre or Mr. Matthews, but this has, of course, a huge potential cost. So I'm wondering if the department has done any sort of cost analysis on that. Do we have an idea what that price tag would be on that modernization?
Maybe I can start, Mr. Chair, and Chief, please feel free to supplement. So the analysis is ongoing. The department did receive funding to do analysis and costing and evaluate options. Obviously, in something like this, it's not a take it or leave it type project. There's options to be discussed and evaluated. So that work is ongoing and will take some time to complete, but it's underway.
Actually, if I could ask to, sorry to interrupt, but what would the timeline be on that then?
I can't give you a firm timeline, but I would, not weeks. We're talking months, and it's been underway for some time. But it is complicated work, and the government will have a decision to make on just what options they'd like to pursue. But that work has still got a ways to go.
Okay. Apologies. Sorry, General Eyre. If you could go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would just add the costs of not doing this. As the threat increases, we see potential adversaries making significant investments in military technology, hypersonic weapons, and the like that increasingly put our continent at risk. If we take a look potential adversaries consider the United States and Canada as one integrated target set. And so given the capabilities that are out there, it is not inconceivable that, including the use of conventional cruise missiles and hypersonics, that we could easily be a threat. As our north opens up and our sovereignty may at some time come into question, we have to be able to respond up there as well. And so the costs of not doing this are something that weigh heavily.
Thank you, Ms. Matheson. Ms. Gallant, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are the most challenging state actors to Canadian national security on the cyber front?
Thank you for the question. As you know, CSE has a mandate to conduct foreign intelligence, and a large part of that is looking at foreign cyber threats. I've also just mentioned that we try to decant the knowledge that we have into our public threat assessments. And so the last national cyber threat assessment did highlight 4 countries, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, as the most significant strategic cyber threats to Canada. But we also talk about how pervasive cybercrime is as an ever-present threat as well.
Thank you very much. Now, the CDS spoke of the threat environment in Canada having changed significantly. Yet in the past 2 years, when our nation was most vulnerable, having a federal government lurching from one failed measure to the next, dealing with COVID, the military was stood down. Troops were sent home and they delivered Uber Eats to make extra money. They couldn't train. They couldn't even go to the gym because the gyms were closed. Basic training that's so badly needed because we're sorely in need of new troops stopped altogether. So whose order was that? Was that the order of the CDS, or was it a political decision to shut things down like that?
So, Mr. Chair, that was a military decision based on the uncertainties in the spring of 2020, not knowing what trajectory the pandemic would take. The machine restarted again in June with the personnel production pipeline, the recruiting, the training, et cetera. And we've learned, and we've continued to evolve over the course of this pandemic, adjusting our measures, adjusting our practices to take into account the safety of our people, while at the same time delivering training, delivering readiness, and performing on operations.
Important health is for the troops, and they're focusing on that. The hospital at Base Petawawa was supposed to open in 2015. Last count, it still wasn't open in 2020. Has it opened yet for operations?
Mr. Chair, I don't know.
Okay, what is the plan to boost troop strength up to where it had been projected to be for this time, but given that we've been in a no-train period for so long? So is there a plan to make up for lost time?
So, Mr. Chair, let me just clarify. We have not been in a no-train situation for some time now. We paused operations for 3 to 4 months in the spring of 2020. But now we are in an operational mode where we're training, we're doing exercises, we're recruiting. So what the plan is, as I mentioned earlier, reinforcing the recruiting system, making changes to the recruiting system to streamline it, to make the personnel production pipeline more efficient. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is on the retention side. So we've just recently published an Armed Forces retention strategy, which it's a targeted retention strategy that focuses on those ranks, those occupations, those cohorts that need to be kept in, that we need to retain.
And is the cyber regiment up to strength and working yet?
So in the Armed Forces, we don't have a cyber regiment. We've several years ago, we stood up a cyber operator occupation. That occupation continues to grow, and it has to continue to grow because so much of our future is going to be based on what those very talented individuals do.
And are they exercising for multifaceted scenarios? The different exercises that we go through at NATO, it will start with a cyber attack, and then there will be a health attack, and then it ends up that it was all related to a kinetic military attack. So are our troops training for those types of scenarios actively?
Mr. Chair, yes, they work. In fact, they are in operations every day. They train every day. They train with the director of CSE's personnel. They work and are employed with CSE personnel as well. They work with our allies. They train with our allies. However, have we broken the code completely on this yet? No, we still need to continue to develop, to train, to learn, and become better each and every day. And I'll ask Ms. Bruce if she has anything to add on that.
She's going to have to add it, answer in another fashion, and maybe as Ms. Gallant's time is up.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the final 5 minutes worth of questions and what. And I think Ms. Gallant asked a legitimate question there, but I want to first of all ask this committee is doing a threat analysis. That's kind of our baseline. We're starting to look at and it's pretty blindingly obvious at this point that threats are up, if you will. The risk of threat is up, and you would know the threats better than we would. And the threats are literally around the world. The two primary actors are, of course, Russia and China. I consider China to be an existential threat to this country. I don't consider Russia to be an existential threat in the same idea. And the military is probably far more focused, maybe not far more focused, but certainly focused on the Russian threat, which I think is coming home to roost in the Arctic. And if you see a map of the Arctic, you can see the militarization of the Arctic quite dramatically from the Russian standpoint. So Ms. Matheson picked up on a point about the readiness of the equipment. And I think the numbers were around 55 to 60% aerospace, and I've forgotten what the land and the sea, but both of them fell below the standards that are reasonable to expect. Whether or not they're aspirational standards, they're certainly well below what any one of us would like to see. So you have a threat that's up and an ability to respond to the threat that's down. And I'm sure that causes you some sleepless nights. I'd be interested in knowing how you intend to rapidly get the military in all of its aspects up to the ever-increasing threat level that we are observing at this committee.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, you did pose a question that does keep me awake at night because those threats are real. And our ability to respond to them are challenged by the challenges to our readiness, challenges to our equipment readiness, challenges to our numbers, and so the reconstitution of the Canadian Armed Forces that I previously talked about is going to be fundamental to achieving that readiness into the future. So rebuilding our personal strength with the right occupations, with the right culture. Focused on operational concepts that need to be put in place, working with allies. And one of the things I didn't mention before in terms of the reconstitution is reconstituting our relationships with allies. I firmly believe that one of our competitive advantages is being a part of a system of like-minded allies and partners that we can work with. And finally, the modernization piece, continuing to invest the right staff into our modernization projects. You know, the new fleets of equipment that need to come in, making sure that we can get the procurement done on those, making sure we've got the force structure right for that. You know, as we face increasing threat to our continent, the continental defense NORAD modernization piece is going to be absolutely critical as well. You know, having infrastructure that we can operate out of in the far north, so that we can project capabilities up there. You know, much like you're absolutely right, what Russia has done. They have occupied many of their previously closed Cold War bases, opened some new ones, and put in place what's called an A2AD, anti-access aerial denial strategy, which basically gives them pretty firm control over their part of the Arctic Ocean. Very similar to what China has done in the South China Sea. We've got to take a look, and we're developing the concepts as to how we can better operate and how we can better project our forces up to the extremities of our country up there. So multifaceted approach, and it's a long answer for a very complex question.
Yeah, I agree that it was a complex question, and certainly you made an admirable stab at responding. What I do worry about is whether we actually have any time for the luxury of thinking about this a great deal, given the increased threat analysis. Colleagues, that does bring us to an end, but I do take note that Ms. Gallant asked a question of CSE, and I know Christmas has passed, but we can open up to see whether Ms. Bruce can answer the question put by Ms. Gallant.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would note that CSE and CAF have a very long-standing partnership, almost 8 decades of collaboration, and CAF's cyber authorities were laid out in the Strong, Secure, and Engaged policy, and CSE has their authorities laid out in the CSE Act. And we have a clear national mandate for protecting Canada's most important systems and information, and for conducting foreign cyber operations as well within certain parameters, and also a new authority to assist CAF with technical and operational support. So we have been working for the last few years together with General Ayers teams to ensure that we can build the processes and the teams and the capabilities that account for our authorities when they come together, and ensure that the governance is in place. So that work is well underway, and is there more work required? Yes, but it's a good news story, I think, at this point. And together, we believe that the blended authorities will give us sufficient range to maneuver across the fullest spectrum of cyber operations.
Thank you, Ms. Bruce, for that answer. I just, on behalf of the committee, want to thank Ms. Bruce, General Eyre, Colonel Holman, and Mr. Matthews for their 2 hours worth of attendance here. It's been a good exchange, sometimes a tad acrimonious, but nevertheless a good exchange. We look forward to your appearance before the committees in the future, and I'm sure in the event that you wish to come before the committee for something that maybe the committee is not summoning you for, feel free to reach out to the clerk or myself. With that, we'll bring the meeting to an end. We look forward to reconvening on February the 14th. Colleagues, at that point, we have confirmed Mr. Raylis, Mr. Colby, Christian Leipruck, and 1 or 2 more that are pending. And on the 16th, Mr. Kolga, Mr. Fadden, Mr. Hampson, and Dr. Paul Talon. So those will be the next 2 meetings on a threat analysis. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Chair?
Yep.